Hello, everyone. Welcome to a KE Report webinar produced in conjunction with Focus Communications. My name is Corey Fleck. I am your host, and we are featuring FireFox Gold, chatting with Patrick Highsmith, chairman and co-founder of FireFox Gold. FireFox is traded on the TSX Venture Exchange under the symbol FFOX, on the OTCQB under the symbol FFOXF, and the Frankfurt Exchange FIY. We're going to be recapping some recent drill results from the company's Mustajärvi project in Finland in the Lapland Greenstone belt. Expansion drilling. This is a project that is really growing through the drill bit with some pretty big step outs. Patrick is going to catch you all up to speed more broadly on the company and then dive into these drill results, what they mean for the company, and where some of the future drilling might be coming from. Just as a note, you are able to ask questions. We encourage you to ask questions through this webinar. Please use either the chat function or the Q&A function within this platform. I will be saving up those questions and also interjecting some of those questions throughout this presentation. Everyone, thank you for joining us. And Patrick, welcome to this webinar. Thank you very much for taking some time to walk through these drill results that were released today, December 8th. Patrick, take it away.
Hi, Corey, and thank you for having us on again. Good to share some news in the middle of a sizable drill program. Good to be with you today. Just want to check, is my screen shared? Can you see it?
The screen looks good. I can see the pointer and I can see the title slide.
Terrific. Well, look, I thought I would walk through a brief intro to FireFox. I'm sure we have some folks in the audience who aren't as familiar with the company, but don't worry, folks. We're going to get right to the discussion of today's results as I get through some cautionary statements here. FireFox, small junior explorer. We are a pure explorer. And founding the company in 2017, we've been focused exclusively on the central Lapland Greenstone belt of northern Finland. And as folks will know, there's been one major discovery there, 4.5 million ounces, more or less, by Rupert Resources, one of our near neighbors. And we continue to advance our discovery at the Mustajärvi project. And we remain, like a lot of exploration companies, treated like a company that is on the hunt in a good gold market, but maybe not having broken through yet. And I think that may be changing for us, Corey. So look, we're a Finland specialist, a lot of experience on the team, but also a really vibrant, young, energized geological team on the ground there. We are on a path to continue to drill and grow the Mustajärvi project, which is what we're going to talk about today, expected to be over 10,000 meters of drilling during this drill program through the winter and into the spring. But we also hold a number of other tenements. We won't talk too much about those today, but we will touch on one or two others, kind of looking forward on our plans. And great shareholder registry, really. Our biggest shareholder is Crescat Capital, and followed right behind them would be Agnico Eagle. Here you can see our list of shareholders, and about 38 million shares outstanding, good cash in the bank, around $5 million. We also have a couple of other institutional shareholders that round out our registry nicely. And we're moving forward in the middle of this drill program, as I said, Corey, and we've just had some great news out today. The team, as you can see, we're lean and mean. Myself and Janice Craig, our CFO, are really the only leadership team members that are not based in Finland. You can see Carl Lufberg, our CEO, Mikko Neninen, our exploration manager. Just going to say right now, it should be Mikko giving this talk, but I speak faster, and English is my first language, so I'm giving it. But Mikko's our exploration manager in Finland. The board, again, rounds out with Rob McNaughton, Andor Lips, and some great advisors as well on the team. John Robbins came on board earlier this year. Big supporter of what we're doing, and Rich Goldfarb, one of the top orogenic gold experts in the world. So that's our team. Let's get down to what's happening in Finland. Just to get folks located, here's a map of Finland, and we're going to be talking about this area in the north, the central Lapland Greenstone belt. And those of you who follow gold projects have certainly heard about greenstone belts around the world, and this one's not too different than those we see in Eastern Canada, Western Australia, West Africa. A little more similar to those in West Africa from an age point of view. These tend to be Proterozoic rocks, and whereas those in sort of Eastern Canada tend to be Archean, a little bit older. But now you're looking at the FireFox properties along with some of our peer group in this part of Lapland. And just to orient folks, Agnico Eagle's Kittilä mine is here at the top center of the slide. 9 million ounces approximately total endowment in that resource where Agnico Eagle is mining today. Rupert's Ikkari deposit here at a pre-feasibility stage joins our Sarvi project, which we'll talk briefly about later. But we're going to focus in on one of our smaller projects, but boy, has it got a lot of high-grade gold on it. We're going to be discussing some of that today, called Mustajärvi. It sits on a paved highway here that stretches between the cities of Kittilä and Sodankylä in the southeast here. Amazing infrastructure in this part of the world. One of the other things you'll see is this through-going black line here. This is called the Serka shear zone, or the Serka line. Big structure, plumbing for smaller gold deposits, and seems to be related to some of these new discoveries that are emerging, sort of splays of this big fault. Folks will have heard of these big faults all around the world when you look at orogenic gold systems. So let's zoom in at Mustajärvi and talk about our news. The Mustajärvi project is spread out over several kilometers. Here you can see a couple kilometer scale bar. And as I said, there's a paved highway running right through the project, even though we're north of the Arctic Circle. There's a high tension power line passing through the project area as well. Tremendous infrastructure. This project is stretched out around several of these big shear zones. One of the big ones is called the Viininjaki shear zone, and there are many splays of that. So think of these as big through-going faults that have shattered the Earth's crust to kilometers deep. And along some of these, we have been drilling some very nice gold over about 2 kilometers of that structure in this area. And we've got these more outlying earlier stage property blocks, which we are advancing also this year. But we're going to focus in on the drill program that's happening here between the northeast and the east zone at the moment. So let's just zoom in a little more, and I'll show you where the news has come from today. As we look at the core area of the project, you can see that paved highway again to get yourself oriented here. And over in this vicinity, the so-called east zone, is a cluster of drill holes that stemmed from really 2022, the discovery of high-grade gold here coming to surface in this sort of beads on a string thing we often see in orogenic gold, Corey. These big structures, the black line here, and initially we had gold at the central zone. We started drilling there in 2018, 2019. The team saw that this structure continued to the northeast. We discovered the so-called northeast zone. Really nice high grade here that we're just starting to follow up on, as a matter of fact, at the northeast zone. But then again, the team found a big flexure in this structure associated with some other anomalies, and we began drilling into the east zone, which was, entirely a FireFox discovery. The news today comes from mostly the southwestern part of the east zone, where we've announced results from a drill hole here, and also a couple of holes around the northern side of this system, and one little fill-in hole over here. So let's zoom right in on that news. We've zoomed right in on the east zone. Now you can see the field of view here in this slide. And hole 5 in this program, really big news today. Hole 1 was about 45 meters away. So we announced this on October 27th. It was a great hole, had some stacked mineralized intervals, multiple intervals. You can see almost 10 meters of 9.3 grams from 65 meters depth, another 11 meters of over 7 grams from 85 meters depth here. It was drilled to look for the southwest trending from this high-grade mineralization at the east zone, partly because a geophysical conductor told us there might be pyrite here. And when there's pyrite, there's very often gold on this project. So we drilled hole 1. Soon after, we collared hole 5 and drilled that, and we've now gotten the assays back for it. And you can see hole 5 was a real zinger. We started with 12.4 meters at 13.75 grams from only 38 meters depth, quite shallow. And that included a 4-meter run of 37.4 grams, over an ounce per ton, tremendous intercept there. A little bit deeper, another 3.75 meters at nearly 20 grams per ton, right around 100 meters downhole depth. So you can see these intervals sort of stacking up here in the trace of this drill hole. And then a little deeper, down at about 217 meters, another 5.7 meters of nearly 18 grams per ton. So a continuation for sure, Corey, but what's interesting is it's confirming early indications of mineralization over in this area that give us sort of two parallel zones. There's this northern zone that pretty continuous, a lot of high grade, as you can see from all these red symbols over the drilling. We trenched high grade gold in that area, as folks may remember. And then the southern lobe, we just had a few holes in it, never really been able to follow up on that. And now with this strong financing we did earlier this year, we're following that zone out to the northwest. And these intercepts are 280 meters from the core zone of high grade that comes to the surface here in this east zone. I'll just work through a little bit more of it as we did in the news release.
Patrick, one more there real quick. So what you're saying here is this is all one zone then, hey? It's just more at surface on the right, more on the eastern side, dipping down to the west.
Corey, that's what we thought at first. And people have said to us, you haven't done any deep drilling, Patrick. And I said, well, we've got gold at surface, so we're going to drill shallow first. But, Corey, we thought when we drilled here initially that this zone would be getting deeper. But as you can see, these intercepts are actually quite shallow. So it appears to be repeating itself a little bit, Corey. And I think we understand why. I'm going to explain a bit more. But let's think about it this way, Corey. What if these rocks are highly folded? And maybe we have one side of the fold here and another side of the fold sort of on the south end. And that would give us two parallel zones, even though they may be the same rocks sort of folded, okay? That's how old these rocks are. They've been deformed and folded and crushed and smashed. So let's say that it's two parallel zones at least, and this one appears to be getting shallow again, which means it may be plunging back to the southwest, and we'll find more at depth. So it is open at depth, Corey. And we're certainly happy to see a deeper intercept down here. You'll notice it's kind of a farther north up in here. So now we have a deep zone up here. Maybe this is related to this shallow stuff here, or maybe, again, it is folds of the same sequence. So let's look a little more at the rocks, Corey, and hopefully folks will understand what I'm saying about that.
Thank you.
So here we see a couple of photos from the news release, and we show these because we want people to understand what this high grade looks like. We've labeled in the core boxes, this is the upper zone, the sweet spot in that upper zone. The labeled intervals here are 4.1 meters at 37.45. That should say grams per ton. My mistake. I was rushing for our podcast. 4.1 meters at 37.5 grams per ton from about 45 meters depth. And you can see here what that looks like. Couple of things to point out. This looks like we typically see at Mustajärvi, meaning see all that pink color. That is the mineral albite. It's a sodium-rich mineral. We call that sodic alteration. The rock is also quite hard. If you try to scratch it, you'll find it's quite hard. It's loaded with quartz, so it's silicified. And then you'll see the white color, some of the black color in here, and you'll see some shiny pyrite if you look closely at those figures, at those photos. And so that's this quartz carbonate tourmaline pyrite alteration, sometimes veins, sometimes disseminated in the rock. So that's typical at Mustajärvi, and you'll see it from our earlier press releases in 2022, 2023, and so forth. So that's consistent. The other thing is, if you look really closely, folks will see banding in the rock with some alignment of black minerals, alignment of quartz and carbonate. That is probably bedding in the rock. It's been now given a texture because of all the smashing that's gone on in these rocks, but it suggests that the mineralization has replaced these units of rock along the bedding. Now, that bedding is highly folded, and one of the things we've been doing since 2022 is investing in more structural geology. We need to learn about the controls on this mineralization, and we've got some structural geology consultants working with us. Our own team is very strong, and what we've learned is there is more folding here than we thought. So when we see this bedding, it might look flat-lying, but it has already been twisted and contorted. So imagine a drill hole going down, Corey, and while the bedding looks kind of perpendicular to the direction that we're drilling, it's probably folded like this. So each time you drill through it, it looks sort of, consistent, but it's been folded, and we've discovered the hinges of those folds. The axial planes, we call it, the hinge of a fold, is a source of highly mineralized, higher grade rocks. So we've been sorting that out, and we're seeing that here in these rocks. Sometimes they don't fold, though, Corey, they break. They get sheared and broken, and you can see when the core is sort of jumbled up, we get breccias. People have probably heard that word a lot before. And again, all that cracking and shattering, probably higher grade. And one more thing I'll point out here. Very often when we see the highest grade, here you see a nice run, 81 grams, almost 20 grams, 36 grams, 15 grams, 14 grams. Then we go into this black rock. That's a mafic dike. Very often, adjacent to these mafic dikes, we're seeing higher grades in the drill core. And that's evident here in this deeper interval as well. 5.7 meters, again, I screwed up, 17.71 grams per ton from 217 meters depth. You can see the labels on this interval. And again, really nice, a little bit less pink, meaning less sodic alteration, but loaded with gold, quite broken up. But look what's right next to it, a gabbro, another of these mafic intrusives or mafic dikes. This is something we see elsewhere in Finland. Folks following Rupert Resources' Ikkari discovery will have noted that they often put drill their best intervals adjacent to mafic and ultramafic bodies as well. It has to do perhaps with the chemistry of those mafic and ultramafic rocks. It may also have to do with they break and they move differently. Maybe the brittle rock right next to a less brittle rock, and that creates plumbing for gold. So this is obviously very technical and geological, but this is what the team's been learning, and we've been able to reproduce these sort of occurrences around the project as we've drilled. So just some geology observations there about what we're learning about the drilling we're doing at Mustajärvi.
Does that make it easier to target moving forward?
Absolutely. We now have gone back, and I'm going to show you in a minute what we've learned about how often we thought, for instance, just here below this mafic dike, Corey, people can see it if they look carefully at the news release. We get back into nice grade gold, 5 grams on the other side. We didn't count that as a continuous interval, but it would have extended the interval several more meters because there's just a little bit of internal waste. The mafic dike only has a little bit of gold in it, but on the other side of it, more gold. So now we can look at the gaps in our drilling and realize, oh, hang on, that gap is there because we had this mafic intrusive rock next to us, which we're happy to see now because we understand it might form a chemical barrier that pulls up the gold on one side, or it might react with those rocks more favorably, as I said, to make the plumbing better. So we're still learning, Corey, but it does help us put the geological picture together. Now here, as we geologists tend to do, we've taken a section through the earth so people can see a little bit of this in 3D. It's a little hard to visualize, so I'm going to point out a couple of things. What you're looking at is you're looking to the northeast, sort of from the south, looking to the northeast, and we've labeled the intercepts that we love in this hole. There's the upper interval, the 12 meters of 13.75, the almost 4 meters of almost 20 grams, and this deeper interval we were just talking about. Right next to, of course, 45 meters away is hole 1 with those nice intercepts. So as we look, you'll notice there's some ghosted shapes in the background. Look how this was the modeling we've done on what that high grade zone 280 meters away looks like. And we're building that model down to the southwest. So we haven't even modeled this yet. We've just got these holes into a brand new area. But you can see behind it, notice, you get bands of high grade. Bands of high grade, and then the yellow colors, lower grade. These bands repeat themselves, and they really support this idea that these zones have been folded. And we're putting that picture together. As we said, you can see it's plunging off to both the south and the west. So these are some of those deeper intercepts. We're really happy to see that we've hit some deeper intercepts way over here on the west side that's going to hopefully show continuity from these deeper zones way back here, 200 meters away. And the same up here at the top. We've got multiple repeated stacked intervals We've followed the trend and the plunge to the southwest, and we're really connecting the dots. In particular, these intercepts down deep are nice grade, and we expect to see this geometry come together better now. So let's look at it again. This is a slide people have noticed from our corporate presentation for some time. This is a 2-kilometer long section where we started drilling in the central zone in 2018. We progressed to the northeast zone 2020 and 2021. Notice what's happening with these high-grade bubbles, Corey. They are telling us, go northeast, young man, go northeast. So we kept coming out to the northeast. We jumped over this area because we knew there was this fault in the northeast, and we drilled the east zone, all those high-grade intercepts at surface. And now, before the drill holes we just announced, this area was open, this untested interval in between, all this nice high grade over here, and we're chasing it back to the southwest towards this northeast zone, which is plunging off in this direction. And I just threw this slide together very quickly. I probably screwed something up, but look what we've done. We've put these new drill holes into this untested area, Corey, and we've hit. There is hole 5 we're just talking about. Multiple layers of high grade, including the shallow zone we've been talking about at 37 meters. Only 45 meters away, more high grade in hole 5, shallow in the hole, and some nice intercepts at depth as well. Again, look at that banding I was speaking about. When there's high grade, there's always layers and bands, and they stack all these high grade intervals down the hole. So clearly, when we see more of that evidence in these new holes into an area that had not been tested before, we've also plotted holes in here, Corey, that we're waiting on assays for. So clearly there's more drilling. Most of this is to the north from where we are, but a lot of good evidence that this zone is really growing to the west and southwest, and also growing at depth. So it's the repeated patterns we see, the same alteration, the similar faulting, the similar stratigraphic control, meaning what layer of the rocks are we in, and is it hosting gold like it was over there 200 meters away? And it is. It's repeating. And really, it's a battle for us to understand these controls, which we've been working on with our structural geologists, like I said. Where's the folding? Where's the shearing? Where's the brittle faulting, where the rocks are just broken up? And can we lead these two zones to connect at depth? No drilling to speak of over 300 meters deep anywhere on the property. So there's a lot of room to work at depth as well. And then, which are the best host rocks, the best places to find high grade? And as I mentioned, one of those tricks is when we see these mafic dikes, perhaps that interval is going to be more predictable now, where the mafic dike gets mapped. We can follow it to depth, and maybe we'll hit gold above it and below it. So the geological picture is really coming together. And I think that starts to show in this section as we advance the drilling into an untested area.
So, Patrick, as you build out this knowledge, is it all about drill holes then? Is that what's giving you all the insight here? Is there any other work, any other surface work that gives you, I guess, a bit more of that roadmap for future drilling?
It's a great question, and it has a twofold answer. One is, it is all about drilling. And in the last few years, everybody knows the junior market's been very tough, Corey. And what would often happen is we would drill a great hole, and we would have raised, a few $1 million, very supportive shareholders, even in the tough market. But, everyone kind of knew, well, FireFox doesn't have much money. They're going to have to come back to the market again, and we'll get another opportunity to maybe buy the stock at a lower price. And that's the ruthless world that we live in, Corey. But in this case, we've got enough money, almost $4 million in the bank. We'll be drilling right through spring. That's what we do in Finland. We prefer to drill in the winter. And so we'll keep drilling, and we can come back just like we've done here, Corey. We had hole 1. Visually, it looked good. And we said, hey, that confirms that geophysical target. Let's drill hole 5, which we've done. And now we've reported that. And as you can see, the trendology is falling into place. So that's thing 1, Corey. Yes, we need a budget to keep drilling. And drill holes are the only way to see down in these areas we're working. But I'll just go back to one other slide to point out to people one sort of harsh reality. The harsh reality is 98% of the landscape you see here is covered by glacial sediment. We mentioned it in the news release. We're typically drilling through 4 to 10 meters of glacial sediment that is on top of the bedrock. I wish we could walk out and look at the rocks and the geologists could map them and we could take samples as we do in deserts or places these things are exposed, but not here. So that's why Mustajärvi wasn't discovered through all those years. There were a few holes here that Outokumpu drilled in the 1990s, but no one knew about any of the rocks we're drilling now. One exception, Corey, is this area here at the triangle target, where we have rock chip samples up to 4.5 grams coming to surface, an undrilled structural target here. You can see this fault in this black line comes back into the main Mustajärvi shear zone, undrilled until this program. We've put a couple of holes across that structure where we think that structure is. It's exposed up here, the gold, but then it gets covered under glacial sediment again. So we will be drilling more holes along this cross-cutting triangle target, we call it, where it comes back into the shear zone, right into that gap we've been talking about between the east and the northeast zone. So it is a bit of a riddle. Without drilling, we can't see through this cover, Corey, but we did have some help in the case of the triangle target. A little bit of gold cropping out up there. Nobody cared when we announced it in the middle of a terrible market that we'd found this zone here, but we'll be drilling more along this structure, and we've got a couple of holes here for which we're waiting on assays to figure out exactly where this structure comes through, and we'll be doing more work there as this program evolves, Corey. In fact, I think the next round of drilling will be testing some of that area.
Okay, Patrick, if you could leave it back there. We have had a few questions, and I think that last slide is a good one to address those on. One being the paved highway. We always hear paved highways are good. This runs right through this project. We can see those little fractures in the middle. Someone's asking if it's a problem at all to have that paved highway so close.
Quite the contrary, actually. Folks will probably know the Kittila mine, Agnico Eagle's mine to the north of us, about 30 kilometers along these paved highways. It was discovered in road crop. The Geological Survey of Finland took the first samples there in a road, and that road was eventually moved as the mine went into production. And so sometimes these road cuts give us a little bit of exploration options like that. And furthermore, we are approved to drill under the highway with the appropriate permits. You can drill under the highway as we've done here. So this allows us to develop and explore to see where the gold goes. And in this case, as you can see, some of these nice zones actually are under the highway or close to it. And so, as in the case of any large discovery, future mining project, the permitting process, of course, will take into account the costs and benefits of development of such a resource. And here we have power close by. We have wonderful infrastructure to access the project at low cost, Corey. That's a real treat. No helicopter-supported drilling here in the Arctic. This is drive out to the property, maybe use a snow machine or a drill rig on tracks to go out on the snow and ice, and we can drive right to the project every day. So it helps us at this stage. And in the future stages, obviously, a relocation of the highway would be considered in a cost-benefit analysis as part of any major permitting. And in showing great economic benefit from developing a resource like this, perhaps the highway would be moved. There's also the possibility, of course, you could mine underground on some of this high grade, and you may or may not have to relocate the highway. We don't even know where the best part of this zone is yet, Corey.
Okay, thank you. Another question. We're getting a lot of questions on if you're planning on building out a resource. We'll talk about that later, so thank you, everybody, for sending those questions in. One other question that relates to this map, this area right in between or right to the left, to the west of where these recent holes are, what's going on there? It looks open.
Yeah, it does look open. And as we've been showing folks for a few years now, this area is it's sort of like, it might be analogous to national forest in the U.S. It's so-called protected ground under the EU's Natura 2000. And it comes up here to the highway between where we've been active. And these areas are spread around the north of Finland. This is not a sort of a national park or anything, but it is a protected area. There is plenty of precedent for exploration and advancing projects on Natura 2000 ground. Up until this point, FireFox has elected not to conduct exploration on Natura ground. But in this case, we have now made application for an area on the southern flank and filling this gap of our Mustajärvi project. And perhaps the nicest thing about Finland's very transparent mineral tenure system and mining law is that it's all about first come, first served. And in this case, we've made the application here to take this as a reservation, which would give us, if granted, the exclusive right to put an exploration permit on this area and allow continued exploration. In general, that's well taken care of in the Finnish laws and precedents for working in that area, but the pace of work requires approvals, and it'll generally take time to develop exploration over such an area. But folks should know that we are protecting our southern flank by securing the first application of this ground between this gap here between the east and the northeast zone, and we would use that time to collect historic data, evaluate the probabilities that the right geological structures come into that area, warranting further exploration in the form of an exploration permit, and subsequently to its granting of such a permit, we would do mechanized exploration in the area. So first and foremost, we've put in an application there, and we're the first to do so, and we're excited about sort of protecting that southern flank with that application for a mineral exploration reservation, which gives us 2 years exclusivity of the rights to proceed with more exploration. So it looks like the data is sort of pointing in that direction, and we wanted to make sure that was the case before we made such an application, Corey. So some good news recently there for us.
Okay, thank you. That addresses these questions on that. Everyone keep sending in your questions. We'll get to them at the end for sure, but continue on here, Patrick. Thank you.
Well, it is a bit of a roadmap, as you sort of said, Corey. You know, we've got this orogenic gold system. We've developed tools to target it. We've been drilling gold, recognizing multiple styles of mineralization. I mentioned in particular a lot of work on structure. And that leads us to a path. We've now added another hole. In total, these great intercepts in hole 5 add up to over 350 gram meters of gold. That means when you multiply the assay times the width, we're now at 15 holes over more or less 100 gram meters. This one is a real zinger with over 350 gram meters in it. You can see we've had a number of high-grade trenches as well. That is painting, kind of a path to lead towards potentially developing a resource here. We documented that the mineralization comes to surface a couple of years ago in 2023 and 2024. Amazing that we were able to trench only 80 meters off that paved highway, Corey, almost 7 meters of 59 grams per ton where that mineralization came to surface. And then again in 2024, we cut another trench about 70 meters away that ran 10 meters of 14 grams, including a lot of high-grade assays. Again, coming to surface, kind of rare these days, just a few meters of glacial sediment covering up this kind of high grade. So when you look at our work here, these things take a few years. We have to keep drilling. You have to be sufficiently funded to drill, evaluate, and drill again. The drill has returned to Mustajärvi again. And as I said, we'll be drilling here right through the spring. Sometimes we go away to another project, drill a couple of holes, come back. We're processing data the whole time. So we believe we are headed towards potential resource here. When you see continuity over these sort of distances of a zone that carries this kind of grade and that it comes this close to surface, in a world today with a gold price of over $4,000 an ounce, to have this kind of grade coming to surface, it really stands out. And orogenic gold is all about the learning and drilling. And we're now in a phase of learning material things about the geology, applying that, and drilling more high grade. So that's the path at Mustajärvi. Very excited about it. One can't predict what happens next, but the best thing we can do at Mustajärvi is come back and drill, because more than 80% of the time we drill at Mustajärvi, we find measurable, significant gold in the drill holes. So there's just it's a big system, and gold sort of everywhere. I'll just wind up really quickly, and then we'll have some time for questions with mentioning one other property. As you can see, we have several projects around the place, and the Sarvi project here, right next to Rupert Resources project, has gotten a lot of attention. And in fact, we recently drilled there at Sarvi. Just going to zoom in here, and I'll also mention while I'm on this slide that folks should look for an update soon on the Kolho property. This is a 120 square kilometer tenement that we own 100% right now, that has been optioned to Agnico Eagle. It's so big, it's got so much potential. It's right in the neighborhood of one of Europe's most recent major discoveries. and it's being explored by Agnico Eagle to earn in to a 75% interest, but they have to spend $12.5 million US to do that. And we'll get our updates of their progress here, and I expect to produce an update on Coho during the holiday season. So work is progressing over here as well to our benefit. But let's talk about Sarvi, which is 100% FireFox. We've zoomed in on the project here just to point out the recent news we announced we had drilled here. Here you can see Rupert's projected and modeled infrastructure at the Ikari project from their PFS study, and the sources given for that information. People can have a look at that report. Here you see a proposed open pit, various mill and infrastructure here. And we're only about 5 kilometers from our boundary here at the Sarvi property. We have 8 kilometers of property boundary here with Rupert, and showing magnetic data here. This is all one big swamp. This area is very swampy, very, very limited outcrop. There's a power line right of way again here, under which there is a bit of outcrop. In this area, we've had some success, some good rock chip samples. One drill hole hit a low-grade interval of gold and silver, and we went a couple kilometers west where we found Geological Survey of Finland drill holes that drilled, a narrow interval of low grade, but pretty shallow, 1.6 meters of a gram, 26 meters depth, and another hole, half a meter of 3.5 grams. And in that area, we've gone in there and recently announced we've drilled 5 holes to follow up on that zone because it's a few kilometers away from our previous work. But there's some important structures in there, and we think this rock type is potentially a great host rock. So we'll announce those results also. It might be after the Christmas holiday, Corey. The labs are pretty backed up, but we just want to let folks know we're advancing also at the Sarvi project. So in summary, number of projects around Lapland, a Finland specialist team. The drilling just goes extraordinarily well. I was out at site, Corey, in late October and early November. Our drillers, Kati Drilling at the time, family-owned business, multi-generation family-owned business, real experts at operating in the Arctic. The drilling's going smoothly. Our team's doing incredible work, and we look forward to a nice, sort of runway in front of us for more drill results from this program. We're sort of roughly halfway through, a little bit more than halfway through with what we planned. But with these sort of results, we may not see drilling stopping anytime soon. A lot of work to do here, and we're getting sort of reinforcing drill results from our perceptions and what we think this target can become. Each time we drill, we get more positive reinforcement. So, yeah, happy to take some more questions or any questions you may have.
Let's get into these questions. Let's just face the one that came in quite a bit is, when do you put a resource on this asset, Mustajärvi, in terms of all the drilling that you've done? Any guidance on that?
Well, look, you can't say when the resource would come. Kind of impossible because the data will dictate that. But what you can see is that we're doing kind of a systematic pattern. First, what you do is you make the discovery. And when one of our close buddies and shareholders and advisors is Quentin Henney. And when we were drilling that high grade, Quentin and I were chatting, and he said, this was in 2022, I think it was. He said, look, don't step out too far, Patrick. You got to figure out what's controlling the gold so that you can target it more accurately. And I think if people look back at our history of news releases and news flow, they'll see some success and then some gaps. And that's because maybe there wasn't enough money to keep drilling, for instance. And so we didn't rush to say, we're going to step out 100 meters. Let's stay close, take the advice of some of our technical advisors, figure out those controls. Now you see, even in 2023, I think it was, we stepped out 200 meters to the west and drilled those holes that started to indicate, hey, that zone is heading off to the southwest. Again, no one really cared. That market wasn't investing in gold exploration and potential discoveries. And now I think the market is investing in exploration and potential discoveries and resources. So first you see we've gone from, is it there? Can we understand it? To, okay, it is there. Let's stretch it out a little bit more. And now we've stepped out a couple of 100 meters, even between these last 2 holes, almost a 50-meter step out there. So I think folks will observe the drill pattern is starting to fall in place, that the east zone is here. The northeast zone is just over here. We've got plenty of room to the north, south of the northeast zone. I'll just show a map real quick because it's, I think, pretty material to this question. If the northeast zone, which is very high grade here, but there's some lower grade intervals over here, we've not drilled it to the south at all. And so we see this southern lobe down here. So there's lots of room here. There's tons of room to the north where the shear zone passes through here. And you see some of these holes are starting to test that. So the first thing to look for is the company drilling holes in a pattern that might give the data needed to model this and get us towards a resource. And I think you'll see we're filling in the gaps. And so I expect before the end of the first quarter, certainly into the second quarter, the sort of systematic drilling that would lead to a potential resource in the future will be happening. We'll watch that data. We'll, of course, be announcing regularly. And these things can be done at this stage of a project. It wouldn't be outlandish to say in a year's time, we could be talking about the shapes that have fallen together, the volume there, and perhaps being able to get an initial resource out. A maiden resource out and its 43101 report to accompany that. So, but I'm not going to predict. The data will show, and we are keeping our shareholders informed with regular announcements, and that'll continue to be the case.
Okay. The market's just changed so much, right? It was 2 years ago. No shareholders wanted you to come out with a resource. Nowadays, everybody wants a resource because they want to compare you to all these other companies. So I guess in that aspect, then, is it fair to say you are focusing on this east zone, filtering over to the northeast zone, maybe to the north up to that triangle target then? This is the main focus at Mustajärvi?
Yeah, it's a good point. That's exactly what we're doing initially, and we're putting this jigsaw puzzle together. But the central zone, we led off with this hole here early when we listed the company, 2 meters of 45 grams. And we've learned so much up here about the controls, and yet we see the same style of alteration here, Corey. We see similar host rocks here, and the same structure ripping through it. So we can't exclude the central zone, and this gabbro target we'll talk about in future probably in future webinars, but it's a big volume of rock that could be a great host rock. As you've heard, gabbro is also often at the scene of the crime up here at the east zone. And the gabbro here with the big structure ripping through it is still a big target. So we're not, and Carl has never allowed the team to focus 100% only on Mustajärvi, or certainly only on the east zone. So you will see us drilling elsewhere. We'll have some news coming out about exploration sort of farther away from this high-grade zone. There's sampling going on. There's geophysics going on that's quite exciting. That Mustajärvi, this shear zone, this structure may be repeating itself in multiple places on this project. Just look at this structure as it passes down through this property, this structure repeating out here, these structures here at the Picoletto target. So we're going to have the drill on this property for a long time, and we are delivering both future potential upside, but also something more concrete that we can sink our teeth into. And that's right here where the data's sort of beating us over the head and shoulders as obvious drill intercepts. But I'll say this about comparison, Corey. You mentioned comparing to peers, and look at grade. I've said for years, I first came to Finland with Newman in 2004, I think it was. And what I noticed was every prospect here sort of has 5 grams per ton. Whereas if you go to West Africa, for instance, similar rocks, every prospect there sort of has 2 grams per ton. So look at the grade here. And when you compare these intercepts to other players in the industry, grade really helps. With this much grade coming to surface and quite near surface at East Zone, it really stacks the odds in your favor for success. So we keep delivering grade. I think people will realize there's more here than meets the eye.
Now, in terms of these shear zones, if you could go back to that other, again, kind of that slide that focuses on more of the east zone, these zones. The east zone, what you're hitting here, there seems to be, is that 2 shear zones that are crossing right there? And you seem to be drilling to the south of that main shear zone, where the drilling in the central zone seemed to be all at that shear zone that was heading across. Is it too early to tell, or can you tell if one side of that shear zone is simply better mineralized the whole way across?
Hey, Corey, you want a job? You want to come help us targeting our next holes
I
here?
enjoy asking the questions. Thank you.
If your voice wasn't so good, I'd say you're a natural geologist. But look, exactly right. There is no hard and fast rule. But just like you pointed out, and I hear all the time in meetings, and I often say this to brokers and non-technical people, these are what you're talking about are structural intersections, Corey. And this one was pretty obvious. I mean, you can see in the magnetic pattern this deflection here. And that meant something was happening with this through-going structure. And we believe it has been offset by a fault like this, or at least interacted with this crossing fault. We believe another one of these exists at the triangle target, which we haven't tested yet, really, just starting to test. And we believe a similar thing happening here at the northeast zone. As of yet, we don't have one mapped in the central zone. There's probably something here in this Gabbro target, as you can see. Okay, so exactly right. The structural intersection, that's plumbing, Corey. So that's shattering the rock. It's creating pathways for the fluids to move. That's what this game is sort of all about, even though it happened, 1.8 billion years ago. But that's thing one. Thing two is a shear zone is not a line on a map. We have to portray it that way, but it is sometimes very narrow structures that we see in the core represent a huge amount of movement over geologic time. And a lot of rock has been sort of compressed and sheared into that. So we draw a line here because it's the best way to recognize it in nature. But it's sort of stacked. And our team led by Mikko Neninen has been working on this concept for a while. And what we are actually drilling here is a lithologic contact between ultramafic rocks here on the south and this stacked up metavolcanic or metasedimentary rock on the north, and that's all dipping towards the south. The shear zone is sometimes right on that contact, as it appears to be, and we've mapped it over here. And here it appears to be offset from that contact a little bit. But this thing can stretch for tens of meters, these shear zones. You can see we've started to indicate a possible another shear zone up here to the north, Corey. As I showed on this slide, I mean, they're all over the bloody place. Okay. So yes, the shear zone is a neighborhood, let's say. And when you get an intersection in that neighborhood, it's a good place to look. And we're certainly in the neighborhood of the shear zone here. And we may find something very interesting going on the south side here, Corey, that's maybe a little bit deeper, but a repeat of that, another splay of that shear zone. And that's why we're doing all this careful work. And that's why you see a nerd like me talking about very subtle features in that core. We're really looking for pretty subtle features that tell us, where is the neighborhood. We can tell you that for kilometers, every time we drill across this structure, we see that pink rock, the albite alteration. It's one of the largest, most extensive alteration system of that type that we have seen anywhere in our work around the world. And it continues for kilometers. And that means there's fluid moving along that structure over geologic time over a great distance. And that means we've got lots of horses in this race that could be a winner for us. And we've just happened to hit a little home run here at this cross structure at the east zone. And now we're getting into something that looks darn near as good as it did originally at the east zone. And it's 280 meters away. So we'll figure out more. We'll put more lines on this map, and we'll get more drill holes, which will enable us to predict even better. Obviously, you can see with the gap in here, you're going to want to drill in this area. You're going to want to drill to the north to see where we again not drilled. These holes are much deeper, but this shallow area here needs to be tested, and all this area to the north along the shear zone needs to be tested. So plenty of targets, Corey, plenty of room and time to keep drilling these kind of features.
Okay, I'll preface these next questions with the fact, as you just said, this is an exploration play. You don't even have a resource yet. There's tons of other targets to test. So I'll group these two questions together that deal with mining. What's the permitting process like to obtain a mining license in Finland? And with the results that you're still seeing now with these high-grade chutes that sometimes are separated by 100+ meters within one drill hole, what would a possible mining method look like?
Great questions. The process in Finland is as transparent and governed by the rule of law as anywhere in the world. Finland repeatedly battles with Denmark for being the least corrupt nation in the world. Folks can go on to the Mining Authority website in Finland in English or Finnish if you prefer, And you'll see the tenement process completely transparent. The permitting process completely transparent. And as we've seen in recent news flow, a couple of years ago, Agnico Eagle modified their permit to sink a shaft and expand the Kittila mine. I would encourage listeners and viewers to review that process and Agnico's disclosures on that. So the process is well established. It is a mining country. What is a little bit new to Finland is gold mining. It was primarily a base metal mining country, but Outokumpu, the national mining company of Finland, a long history of mining here. So plenty of trail blazed for permitting mines. And what I would say is this: there are no shortcuts in Finland or any first world nation with unbelievable infrastructure and quality of life like the Finns have. So there will be a transparent process. There will be public hearings. And we model these things kind of along the global average, Corey, on the short side of the global average for permitting, 5 to 7 years to move these things forward. Once the work begins in earnest. And we have somebody blazing a trail as we watch Rupert Resources advance their big project. So not worried at all about that. You don't take shortcuts as a quality operator, and the permitting process takes care of that. So that's great. As for mining method, again, we have precedent. And look at the Kittila mine's history. I visited that project a few years ago on a tour with the other groups. And started with a couple of relatively small open pit mines, Corey, as you do when you've got mineralization at surface. Clearly, the East Zone, if it were mined in the future and the data supported that, you would envision there will be an open pit component to it, since we've seen this high grade coming to surface. And that may be where you start. But orogenic gold continues to great depths. There are intercepts at the Kittila mine. People should research that for themselves, but I believe there are intercepts at 2 kilometers depth or greater of potentially economic grade and width. So there are orogenic gold mines around the world that have mined to greater depths than that. So, and that fits pretty well. I was doing some marketing in Australia, and the Australian model in Western Australia in these similar types of deposits was very often a smaller, medium-sized open pit from which you generate your cash flow, you set up your operation, and then you go to depth, either with a decline to go underground from depth or even a shaft later as the system dictates. And this type of mineralization, these intercepts, people talk about a 100-meter gap between these intercepts. When you're looking at 100-gram-meter intercepts or 85-gram-meter intercepts in the same hole like we've just drilled, these things would be economic pretty much anywhere in the world when supported, by infrastructure and growing, the database to support that. So when you see these sort of intercepts, 100 meters between them, if there's continuity along this structure that indicates this deep zone is there, very easily could be mined at that quite modest depth, 200 meters below surface, not very deep. So when you've got this kind of grade, all the rock doesn't have to be mineralized, but the thicker intercepts that we've been drilling in recent years at Mustajärvi, just going back to one of these other slides, we stacked up a number of them, right here. And these are the sort of intercepts we were drilling, 14 meters wide, 15 meters wide, 13, 12, and we've continued to repeat that, 16 and a half meters at almost 8 grams over here at the northeast zone. These are widths that are likely to be economic, and it'll boil down to, is there enough gold in this volume of rock to support mining that volume of rock to get to it? That's how a resource comes about, and we think the data will take care of that, and we think we could well see open pit mining here followed up with underground mining in the future, should the data support that and the resource come together with all those necessary caveats. It's a long road to demonstrate any economics, and we're not talking about any such things yet, but these intercepts really paint a picture of that possibility growing.
Okay. 2 more questions, then we'll wrap this up. One regarding the other projects. You do keep sprinkling in some drilling on these other assets, but with what you're seeing at Mustajärvi here, when does it come the point to simply focus on Mustajärvi and maybe look for JV partners or other partners for these other assets?
Great question. And we're, to be clear, we're an owner-operator explorer. We are not a prospect generator. And that's because we believe that the prospects for discovery of a large gold deposit can produce so much return for our shareholders and our team, of course, that we want to own our discoveries and maximize the value for the shareholders that way. Now, that said, we have numerous projects around the belt, and we have entered into one amazing earn-in joint venture with a major company on a large property there at Colho. Others are available, and we have had discussions. We also say no pretty regularly, Corey, to those proposals. Folks may know those proposals are usually quite opportunistic from another company, and we would want to guard against giving up the potential for discovery too quickly. And in the case of when do we focus on Mustajärvi, I think a quality team of experienced professionals can do more than just one thing at a time. So all we're doing here is probably focusing 75% of the drilling and the effort at Mustajärvi. And at times it is 100%, of course. And so we kind of go that way because the business of discovery is so challenging. Any one project making it all the way to a mine, the probabilities are always against you in exploration. And so in our view, it is better to have more opportunities and manage them carefully than it is to put all your eggs in one basket. I'm not sure if I can cram another cliche into that paragraph, but anyway, the point is we can do more than one thing at a time, and we are. And where we are right next to a major discovery, I mean, the real estate value of Sarvi right next to Rupert could be more than our market cap, quite frankly. So clearly that horse is in the race, and we're gonna continue to test those targets. So look around the world, you'll find the best explorers in the world probably are doing more than one thing at a time. And we intend to be certainly first the best explorer in northern Finland, and then we'll see just how good this team is as we produce results going forward.
All right, final question then. When will we see the next batch of drill results being released?
I wish it were sooner. The assay labs are backed up pretty good. So I'm not sure. Certainly no one hole is really material. So we try to gather them in groups as we've done here with some sort of logic to it. But I would say we'll be ready. We'll have all the assays in on the next batch. It was just November when I was there. So I expect we won't see another drilling news release for maybe 3 weeks-ish or something like that. But we do have some other news to report on, just sort of updates. So we'll get some more news out probably before the Christmas break. And big drilling news will come when it'll come. But I would say it'll be, couple 3 weeks away, and we'll see where that lands. But and then we'll be across in Canada at Roundup and the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference in January, and I expect there'll be plenty of news flow between now and then.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Patrick. And yes, for all of you wondering, this webinar will be available on replay. I assume the PDF will also be available on the company's website, but you can also just read over the recent news too that was released today as we're recording it Monday, December 8th. Again, I've been chatting with Patrick Highsmith, chairman and co-founder of FireFox Gold. Everyone, thanks for tuning in. And Patrick, thanks for walking us through these drill results.
Thank you, Corey. Happy holidays and Merry Christmas to everybody.